The mahogany conference table gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights as Kai Morrison leaned back in his leather chair, steel-gray eyes fixed on the trembling board members across from him. Morrison Industries' hostile takeover of Blackstone Corp was about to become a bloodbath, corporate style. "Gentlemen," Kai's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "you have exactly 60 seconds to sign those papers, or I'll get your company piece by piece and sell the scraps to your competitors." The Blackstone executives exchanged panicked glances. They'd heard the rumors about Morrison, that he was more wolf than man, that he'd never lost a business deal, that crossing him was signing your own death warrant. What they didn't know was that most of those rumors were true. Kai's inner wolf prowled restlessly beneath his perfectly tailored Armani suit. At 32, he'd built an empire that spanned both the human corporate world and the largest werewolf pack on the East Coast. Fear was his currency, and he spent it liberally. 50 seconds, he drawled. That's when his secretary, Margaret, burst through the mahogany doors without knocking, something that had never happened in the 15 years she'd worked for him. "Mr. Morrison, I'm so sorry, but..." "Margaret." His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I'm in the middle of..." "Please, Mr." The small voice stopped Kai's heart mid-beat. A tiny hand pushed past Margaret's trembling legs, and a little girl stepped into the conference room. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old, with coffee-colored curls that caught the light and skin like warm honey. But it was her eyes that knocked the breath from Kai's lungs, golden eyes, exactly like his own, shining with an unmistakable alpha aura that made his wolf sit up and take notice. The child clutched a crumpled envelope against her small chest, her bottom lip trembling as she looked up at him with a mixture of hope and fear. "Can you read this letter?" she asked in the sweetest voice Kai had ever heard. "Mommy said it's very important." The scent hit him then, not just the child's scent, but something deeper, something that made his soul recognize what his mind couldn't accept. This pup carried his bloodline. His blood. His pack. His. Everyone out. The command ripped from his throat with alpha authority that brooked no argument. The Blackstone executives scrambled from their chairs, papers scattering, briefcases forgotten. Even Margaret backed toward the door, though she hesitated at the threshold. "Sir, should I?" "Out." The door clicked shut, leaving Kai alone with the impossible child who smelled like family, like pack, like everything he'd convinced himself he didn't need. He rose slowly from his chair, every instinct screaming at him to approach carefully. The little girl, Fiona, something inside him whispered, "Her name is Fiona," didn't back away. Instead, she held up the envelope with both hands, her golden eyes never leaving his. Kai's hands shook as he took the letter. The handwriting on the outside made his knees nearly buckle, "For Kai, when the time comes. All my love, Elena." Elena. His fated mate. His heart. His soul. Dead 5 years now, killed in a car accident that had shattered him so completely he'd sworn never to love again. Except she wasn't dead, was she? With careful fingers, he opened the envelope and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Elena's familiar handwriting blurred as his eyes filled with tears he thought had dried up years ago. "My darling Kai. If you're reading this, then our daughter has found you." "Yes, our daughter, Fiona Elena Morrison, born exactly 9 months after I had died. I'm sorry for the lie, my love, but it was the only way to protect her from your enemies. From Simon Blackwood and his pack. They would have used her against you, used her to destroy everything you've built. I've been hiding for 5 years, watching you from afar, raising our beautiful girl and telling her stories about her daddy, the strongest, bravest alpha who ever lived. She has your eyes, Kai. Your strength. Your stubborn streak too. But I'm dying now. Really dying this time. The curse Simon placed on me before I faked my death is finally claiming me. I have maybe days, maybe hours left. Fiona needs her father. She needs her pack. She needs you. I've hidden clues about my location in the stories I've told her, the bedtime tales about the Moon Princess and her secret castle. Fiona knows them all by heart. She's the key to finding me, Kai. But be careful. Simon knows about her now. He's been hunting us. He knows what she represents. Love her, protect her, and forgive me. Forever yours, Elena. P.S. Ask her about the Moon Princess story. She'll know what to do. Kai's hands trembled as he folded the letter. When he looked up, Fiona was watching him with those devastating golden eyes, her small face serious beyond her years. "You're my daddy, aren't you?" she whispered. The word hit him like a physical blow. Daddy. He was a father. Had been a father for 4 years without knowing it. "Yes," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, I'm your daddy." Fiona smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. She looked so much like Elena in that moment that Kai had to grip the edge of the conference table to keep from falling to his knees. "Mommy said you might cry," Fiona said matter-of-factly. "She said daddies cry when they're happy sad." Did she now? Kai crouched down until they were eye level, studying every detail of his daughter's face. His daughter. The words still didn't seem real. Fiona nodded solemnly. "She told me lots of stories about you. About the Moon Princess and her brave Wolf King who fought monsters to keep everyone safe." Something cold slithered down Kai's spine. "What else did Mommy tell you about the stories?" "She said if I ever found you, I should tell you about where the Moon Princess hid her secret castle." Fiona's eyes grew wide with excitement. "Do you want to hear it? It's my favorite story." Before Kai could answer, Margaret's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Morrison? I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are several unmarked vans parked outside the building. Security is asking." The intercom cut to static. Kai's wolf senses exploded into high alert. The scent of unfamiliar wolves drifted through the building's ventilation system. Hostile wolves, hunting wolves. Simon Blackwood's pack. They'd found Fiona. "Fiona," Kai said, forcing his voice to stay calm even as every protective instinct in his body roared to life. "I need you to tell me that story right now, sweetheart. About where the Moon Princess hid her castle." But Fiona had gone very still, her little nose twitching as she caught the scent that had Kai's wolf howling for blood. When she looked up at him, her golden eyes held an alpha's steel that no 4-year-old should possess. "The bad wolves are here, aren't they, Daddy?" she whispered. "Mommy said they might come. She said you'd keep me safe." The building's fire alarm began shrieking, and somewhere far below, Kai heard the distinctive sound of claws on marble, werewolves in partial shift, moving fast, hunting. Time was up. Kai swept Fiona into his arms, her small body fitting perfectly against his chest as if she'd always belonged there. "Hold on tight, baby girl," he murmured against her hair. "Daddy's got you." But even as he moved toward the private elevator that would take them to his penthouse and the escape route he'd built there, one thought echoed through his mind. Elena was dying, his enemies had found their daughter, and somewhere in a 4-year-old's bedtime stories lay the key to saving what was left of his shattered family. The elevator doors closed just as the first howl echoed up from the lobby below. Chapter 2. The private elevator shot upward with mechanical precision while Kai's world tilted on its axis. Fiona pressed herself against the far corner of the small space, her golden eyes wide with fear, not of the wolves hunting them, but of him. "You're scary," she whispered, clutching Elena's letter against her chest like a shield. "Mommy said you were gentle like the Wolf King in the stories, but you're all growly and your eyes are mean." The words hit him like silver bullets. Kai forced his wolf to retreat, schooling his features into something less predatory, though his hands still shook with the need to hunt, to kill, to protect. 5 years of ruling through fear and intimidation had carved lines in his face that no 4-year-old should have to see. "I'm sorry, baby girl," he said, crouching down to her level despite the elevator's movement. "I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the bad wolves who want to hurt you." Fiona studied him with an intensity that reminded him painfully of Elena. "Mommy said you roar when you're scared, not angry." "Are you scared, Daddy?" "Terrified." The admission lodged in his throat like a stone. He was Kai Morrison, alpha of the largest pack on the East Coast, CEO of a billion-dollar empire. He didn't get scared. But looking at his daughter, this miracle child he'd never known existed, fear clawed at his chest like a living thing. A little, he admitted. The elevator dinged softly as they reached his penthouse. Kai swept Fiona back into his arms, noting how she remained stiff and uncertain, nothing like the trusting child who should run to her father's embrace. Elena had built him up as a hero in her stories, but reality was crushing those fairy tale expectations with every passing second. His penthouse spread before them in stark minimalist lines, all black marble, steel, and glass. No warmth. No color. No hint that a child might ever belong here. Fiona's small voice echoed his thoughts. It's cold, Daddy. Like the ice castle where the Moon Princess was trapped. Kai's blood chilled. Tell me about that story, Fiona. The one about the ice castle. But she was already moving, drawn to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. Her reflection looked impossibly small against the vast expanse of glass. The Moon Princess lived in a beautiful castle made of ice and stars, she began, her voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a well-practiced tale. But she was very lonely because the shadow wolves had stolen all her family away. She had to hide from them, but she left special messages for anyone brave enough to find her. What kind of messages? Fiona pressed her palm against the cool glass. Numbers. Like the ones Mommy taught me. She said if I ever met my daddy, I should tell him about the princess's favorite number. What number, sweetheart? 47. Fiona turned from the window, her golden eyes bright with remembered excitement. That was how many friends the Moon Princess saved from the shadow wolves. Mommy made me practice writing it lots of times. 47. The number hit Kai like a physical blow. 47 had been Elena's apartment number when they'd first met. The address where she'd told him she loved him for the first time. But more than that, 47 was also the number of pack members who died in the accidents that had plagued his territory over the past 5 years. Not accidents. Systematic elimination. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. Simon Blackwood, his beta, his business partner, his brother in all but blood, flashed across the screen. Uncle Simon. Fiona squealed with delight, recognizing the name. Uncle Simon. Kai's finger hovered over the accept button as ice formed in his veins. Elena had let Fiona know Simon? When? How? He answered on speaker. Simon. Kai, thank God. I just got word about the attack on Morrison Industries. Are you safe? Simon's familiar voice carried exactly the right note of concern, the same tone he'd used to comfort Kai through Elena's funeral 5 years ago. We're secure, Kai said carefully, watching Fiona's face light up at the sound of her uncle's voice. We? Kai, who's with you? Something cold and predatory slithered through Kai's chest. Simon didn't know about Fiona, or at least, he was pretending not to know. A friend's daughter. She's helping me with something. Can I talk to Uncle Simon? Fiona whispered, bouncing on her toes. Mommy said he has funny jokes. The world stopped. Kai's wolf snarled to the surface, golden eyes blazing as he stared at his innocent daughter. Fiona, he said very carefully, when did you meet Uncle Simon? He visited Mommy sometimes when she was sad. He brought me chocolate and told stories about when you were little. Fiona's brow furrowed with confusion. Why are you growling again, Daddy? Kai? Simon's voice sharpened with concern. Is everything all right? You sound. Kai ended the call and immediately powered down his phone, his mind racing through 5 years of lies and manipulation. Simon had known. Simon had known about Elena, about Fiona, about everything. His brother, the man he'd trusted with his life, his pack, his business, was working with their enemies. Fiona, I need you to listen very carefully, Kai said, forcing his voice to remain calm even as rage and betrayal clawed at his insides. When Uncle Simon visited you and Mommy, what did he ask about? He asked lots of questions, Fiona said, settling cross-legged on his pristine marble floor. About my dreams, about why my eyes glow sometimes, about whether Mommy taught me any special songs. Special songs? Fiona nodded enthusiastically. The Moonborn songs. Mommy said they were very important, that I should never sing them unless. Her face scrunched with concentration. Unless the darkness came to take me away. Then I should sing as loud as I could. Moonborn. The word exploded through Kai's consciousness like a revelation. The ancient bloodline, thought extinct for over a century. Wolves who could commune with Fionar energy, who possessed powers that made regular werewolves seem like house pets. Elena hadn't just been his fated mate. She'd been Moonborn. Which meant Fiona. Sweetheart, Kai said, his voice hoarse with understanding, show Daddy what happens when your eyes glow. Fiona bit her lower lip nervously. Mommy said I should only do it for family. I'm your daddy. I'm family. She studied his face for a long moment, then took a deep breath. Her golden eyes began to shimmer, then blazed with silvery light that seemed to pull energy directly from the moon hanging in the darkening sky beyond his windows. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, and frost began forming on the marble floor in intricate, beautiful patterns. Power. Raw, untrained, devastating power that had no business manifesting in a 4-year-old. Fiona, Kai whispered, awed and terrified in equal measure, how long have you been able to do this? Since forever, she said matter-of-factly, the light fading from her eyes as quickly as it had appeared. Mommy said it meant I was special, but that bad people would want to hurt me if they knew. The bad people already knew. They'd always known. Kai's phone, despite being powered down, suddenly blazed to life. A single text message appeared on the screen, impossible, since the device was completely offline. The last Moonborn child cannot hide forever. We're coming for her. MB. Simon Blackwood. Not Simon Morrison, his chosen brother and beta. Simon Blackwood, leader of the rogue pack that had been systematically hunting Elena's bloodline for years. Daddy? Fiona's small voice cut through his shock. There's more to the Moon Princess story. Do you want to hear it? Kai knelt beside his daughter, noting how she still kept careful distance between them, still watched him with that heartbreaking wariness. Tell me everything, baby girl. The Moon Princess wasn't alone in her ice castle, Fiona began, her voice dropping to a whisper as if she were sharing the greatest secret in the world. She had a sister, the Star Princess, who everyone thought was dead. But she wasn't dead. She was just sleeping, waiting for the right song to wake her up. Kai's heart stopped. What was the Star Princess's name? Fiona's eyes grew wide with excitement. Lydia. Just like Aunt Lydia in the pictures Mommy showed me. Lydia. His sister. His twin sister who'd died in the same car accident that had supposedly killed Elena 5 years ago. But Elena wasn't dead. Which meant Lydia. Where is the Star Princess sleeping, Fiona? In the crystal cave, under the weeping mountain, where the moon touches the earth, she recited. Mommy said if anything ever happened to her, she'd tell my daddy about the crystal cave, and he'd know how to find Aunt Lydia. Before Kai could process this revelation fully, the lights in his penthouse flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light that made Fiona's golden eyes look like liquid fire. They're here, she whispered, and for a moment she sounded far older than 4 years old. The Shadow Wolves. They found us. The distinctive sound of claws on marble echoed from the stairwell. His private elevator had been compromised. Kai swept Fiona into his arms, grabbing the go-bag he kept hidden behind a false panel in his closet. Years of alpha paranoia had prepared him for this moment, though he'd never imagined he'd be protecting a child, his child. Hold on tight, he murmured against Fiona's hair, carrying her toward the emergency exit he'd built into his penthouse years ago. They made it 3 steps before Simon stepped out of the shadows, no longer bothering to hide his betrayal. His face was cold, calculating, nothing like the brother who'd comforted Kai through Elena's funeral. Hello, nephew, he said to Fiona, his voice sickeningly gentle. Uncle Simon has some friends who are very excited to meet you. Fiona buried her face against Kai's neck, her small body trembling. Daddy, she whispered, he smells like shadows now. I know, baby girl. Kai's wolf rose to the surface, ready for battle. I know. This doesn't have to be complicated, Kai, Simon continued, flanked by 6 rogue wolves in partial shift. The child is an abomination. Moonborn power was meant to die out. Elena should have stayed dead, and that thing she spawned should never have been born. Over my dead body. Simon smiled, and it was the coldest thing Kai had ever seen. That can be arranged. Did you really think Elena acted alone all these years? Did you think she could hide from me without help? The truth hit Kai like a sledgehammer. You've been hunting other survivors. 47 and counting, Simon confirmed. Elena was always too soft-hearted. She kept trying to save them, gather them together like some kind of underground railroad for genetic freaks. But she led me right to them, one by one. Fiona lifted her head from Kai's shoulder, her golden eyes beginning to glow with that otherworldly light. You hurt my mommy, she said in a voice that carried power no 4-year-old should possess. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost spread across the walls, the windows, Simon's wolves. But instead of fear, Simon looked excited. Look at that power, he breathed. She's already manifesting at barely 4 years old. Do you have any idea what we could accomplish if we harvest that energy? What weapons we could forge? You're insane. I'm practical. The world is changing, Kai. Humans are getting stronger, smarter, more suspicious. We need every advantage we can get, and moonborn power is the ultimate trump card, if it's properly controlled. Fiona's power flared brighter, and one of Simon's wolves yelped as ice crystals began forming in his fur. But the effort was too much for her small body. She sagged against Kai, the light fading from her eyes. Mommy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I can feel her. She's. What, sweetheart? Dying. The shadow sickness is eating her up. Fiona's tears froze on her cheeks. She needs me to sing the healing song, but I don't remember all the words. Simon stepped forward, his smile turning predatory. Give me the child, Kai, and I'll tell you where Elena is. You can say goodbye before the curse finishes its work. Never. Then you'll watch your mate die slowly while your daughter learns what real wolves do to abominations. Simon raised his hand, and his wolves moved forward in perfect coordination. But before they could strike, Fiona whispered something in a language that predated human civilization, words that seemed to pull power directly from the moon itself. The windows exploded outward in a shower of silver light and razor-sharp glass. Simon's wolves screamed as Fionar energy tore through them like acid, but Simon himself stood untouched, protected by some kind of dark magic that made Kai's skin crawl. Impressive, Simon said, seemingly unbothered by the destruction. But she's still just a child, and children tire easily. He was right. Fiona was unconscious now, her small body limp in Kai's arms, the effort of using her power having drained her completely. Sleep tight, little moon child, Simon murmured, producing a dart gun from his jacket. When you wake up, you'll have a new family. And Daddy here will have a very different understanding of what it means to lose everything. The dart hit Fiona before Kai could move, some kind of supernatural sedative that bypassed her natural werewolf immunity. She went completely limp, her breathing shallow but steady. The game changes now, Simon said as his remaining wolves surrounded them. Elena dies in 12 hours unless she gets moonborn healing, which only Fiona can provide. Your sister Lydia remains trapped in magical stasis until the child sings her free. And you, dear brother, get to choose which one lives and which one dies. Where is Elena? Find the crystal cave under the Weeping Mountain, and you might have your answer. Simon gestured to his wolves. Take the child. Leave Alpha Morrison to contemplate his choices. No. Kai lunged forward, but something invisible slammed him back against the wall with bone-crushing force. Dark magic. Simon wasn't just working with rogues, he was working with something far worse. The last thing Kai saw before unconsciousness claimed him was Fiona's still form disappearing into the shadows, carried away by monsters wearing familiar faces. The hunt had begun in earnest, and he was already losing. Chapter 3. Kai woke to darkness and the taste of his own blood. The elegant penthouse lay in ruins around him, shattered glass, twisted metal, and the lingering scent of dark magic that made his wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. But worse than the physical destruction was the hollow ache in his chest where Fiona's presence should have been. His daughter was gone. The rational Alpha CEO part of his mind catalogued his injuries: 3 cracked ribs, possible concussion, multiple lacerations from flying glass. But the primal wolf beneath his carefully constructed facade howled for blood, for hunt, for the ancient justice that came with fang and claw. For 5 years, he'd kept that darker side of his nature leashed, channeling his wolf's aggression into boardroom conquests and corporate warfare. Elena's death, her supposed death, had nearly broken him, but he'd survived by burying the savage Alpha deep beneath layers of civilization. Now, with Fiona stolen and Elena truly dying somewhere beyond his reach, those carefully built walls crumbled like sand. Kai threw back his head and howled, not the controlled Alpha command he used to manage his pack, but the raw, primal scream of a father whose child had been ripped away. The sound shattered what remained of his windows and sent car alarms wailing 30 floors below. When the echoes faded, something had fundamentally changed. His wolf no longer paced, it prowled, golden eyes blazing with predatory intelligence that made his human consciousness feel like a passenger along for the hunt. Find pup. Kill enemies. Protect family. The wolf's desires were beautifully simple. Kai rose from the debris with fluid grace, every movement now carrying the deadly precision of an apex predator. His expensive suit hung in tatters, his perfectly styled hair was matted with blood, but his golden eyes burned with purpose that transcended human understanding. Fiona's scent still lingered in the air, honeysuckle and moonlight, with an underlying power signature that called to something ancient in his DNA. But there was more than scent to follow. As he stood among the ruins of his old life, he felt it, a thread of connection that pulsed with each heartbeat, a psychic bond he'd never experienced before. Daddy? Fiona's voice whispered through his mind, faint as a ghost but unmistakably real. She was alive, conscious, and somehow reaching across impossible distance to touch his thoughts. I'm coming, baby girl. Hold on. I'm scared, Daddy. The Shadow Man put me in a cage with other children, and Mommy. Mommy is here, but she's sleeping wrong. Elena. His heart clenched with desperate hope and terror. If Fiona was with Elena, then following this new psychic connection would lead him to both of them. But first, he needed allies. Kai's remaining pack members arrived within minutes of his howl, 12 wolves who'd been loyal to him for years, men and women who'd built their lives around his careful, controlled leadership. They took one look at their alpha and stepped back in unison. Jesus, Kai, breathed Thomas, his lieutenant. Your eyes are different, Kai finished, his voice carrying harmonics that made his pack's wolves submit automatically. As am I, Fiona has awakened something that was always meant to be. He didn't explain further. Couldn't explain that the psychic bond with his moonborn daughter was changing him on a cellular level, awakening dormant genes that had been sleeping in his bloodline for generations. Simon has betrayed us, he continued, watching his pack's faces shift from confusion to fury. He's taken Fiona to enemies who want to harvest moonborn power. We hunt them now, and we show no mercy. The pack's response was immediate and absolute. Whatever they saw in their alpha's transformed presence, it called to the most primitive parts of their nature. Where do we start? Asked Sarah, his best tracker. Kai closed his eyes and felt for the thread connecting him to Fiona. It pulsed stronger now, pulling him northwest toward the mountains that bordered their territory. The crystal cave under Weeping Mountain, he said, remembering Fiona's story. Elena left us a trail. The journey to the mountains took 3 hours of hard driving through increasingly remote terrain. But as they drew closer, the psychic connection grew stronger, and with it came fragmentary images that made Kai's blood run cold. Fiona, small and frightened, pressed against the bars of a cage that looked like it belonged in a medieval dungeon. Other children around her, some human, some clearly supernatural, all bearing the hollow-eyed look of captives who'd given up hope. And Elena. Elena, lying on a stone altar, her beautiful face gaunt and gray, silver chains around her wrists that burned her skin wherever they touched. The curse was devouring her from the inside, but she was fighting it with every ounce of moonborn power she possessed. Fighting to stay alive long enough to see him one last time. The cave system Simon had hidden his operations in was extensive, carved deep into the mountain's heart and warded with magic that made Kai's skin crawl. But Fiona's psychic connection cut through the supernatural barriers like a beacon, leading them to a service entrance that had been cleverly concealed behind a waterfall. Thomas, Sarah, take 6 wolves and circle to the main entrance, Kai commanded, his voice carrying alpha authority that brooked no argument. Make noise, draw their attention. The rest of you, follow me. What about backup? Thomas asked. If this is as big as you think. No backup, Kai's eyes blazed gold in the darkness. This ends tonight, one way or another. They descended into the earth through tunnels that reeked of suffering and dark magic. The deeper they went, the more Kai could feel Fiona's terror bleeding through their connection. She was trying to be brave for the other children, telling them stories about the Wolf King who would come to save them, but underneath her courage lay bone-deep exhaustion. She was only 4 years old, and she'd been carrying burdens no child should bear. Hold on, baby girl. Daddy's almost there. Hurry, came her faint reply. Mommy's getting colder. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber that took Kai's breath away. What he'd expected to find was a crude rogue wolf operation, maybe some hastily constructed holding cells and basic equipment. What he found was a sophisticated supernatural research facility that had clearly been years in the making. Dozens of cells lined the walls, most occupied by children ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers. Not all of them were werewolves. Kai caught scents that suggested vampires, fae, even what might have been phoenix blood. Someone had been systematically collecting supernatural children from across the continent. And in the center of the chamber, on a raised dais surrounded by arcane symbols that hurt to look at directly, lay Elena. She was chained to a stone altar with silver bonds that gleamed with malevolent energy, her once vibrant dark hair now streaked with premature white. But her golden eyes, so much like Fiona's, tracked his movement with desperate hope. Kai. Her mental voice was barely a whisper, but it hit him with the force of a sledgehammer. 5 years of believing she was dead, 5 years of mourning, 5 years of building walls around his heart, all of it crumbled in an instant. I'm here, love. I'm here. But before he could reach her, Fiona's terrified scream cut through the chamber like a knife. Daddy. She was in a reinforced cage near Elena's altar, pressed against the bars with tears streaming down her face. The sight of his daughter, his brave, impossible daughter, trapped like an animal sent Kai's carefully leashed wolf into a killing rage. He started toward her cage, but Simon's voice stopped him cold. I wouldn't, if I were you. Kai spun to find his former beta emerging from the shadows, flanked by 24 rogue wolves and something that made his blood turn to ice. The man walking beside Simon was supposed to be dead. Had been dead for 15 years, killed in the same accident that had shaped Kai's entire adult life. His father. Alpha Jonathan Morrison. Hello, son. Jonathan's voice carried the same commanding presence Kai remembered from childhood, but now it was tainted with something cold and calculating that made his skin crawl. You've grown into quite the leader. I'm proud of what you've built, it's been very useful for our operations. You're dead. Kai's voice came out as barely more than a growl. Death is relative for those with the right connections, Jonathan replied smoothly. I needed to disappear for a while, let you develop into the alpha I always knew you could be. But more importantly, I needed time to build something bigger than a single pack. He gestured to the facility around them, the cages full of children, the mystical equipment humming with stolen power, the dozens of rogue wolves who stood at attention like a supernatural army. Behold the future, Kai. Not just werewolves scraping for territory and hiding from humans, but a unified supernatural empire with the power to remake the world according to our will. By torturing children? By harvesting the power that lesser beings waste through ignorance and sentiment. Jonathan's eyes hardened. Do you know what these creatures are capable of when their abilities are properly extracted and concentrated? Young Simon here has been testing our methods for years. Simon stepped forward with a tablet, displaying video footage that made Kai's stomach turn. Supernatural children strapped to tables, their screams echoing as machines drained the very essence of their power. Others forced to perform increasingly dangerous feats until their abilities burned out their nervous systems. 47 confirmed eliminations from the Moonborn bloodline alone, Simon reported with clinical precision. But we've been saving the best for last. He nodded toward Fiona, who had gone very still in her cage. Her golden eyes were beginning to glow with that otherworldly light, but instead of the beautiful display Kai had seen in his penthouse, now there was something desperate and dangerous building behind her gaze. The bridge walker, Jonathan breathed, his voice filled with hungry anticipation. Born once every 1,000 years, possessing the power to tear down the barriers between worlds. With her abilities properly harnessed, we could open permanent gateways to the supernatural realms, bringing through armies of creatures that would make human resistance laughable. She's 4 years old, Kai snarled. She's a weapon, Jonathan corrected. The most powerful weapon that has ever existed. And thanks to Elena's maternal instincts, she's been properly trained to access her abilities on command. Elena made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Even chained and dying, she radiated defiance that made Kai's heart ache with pride and love. You'll never control her, she whispered, her voice carrying despite its weakness. Fiona is love, not violence. She's hope, not destruction. We'll see. Jonathan produced a device that looked like a twisted combination of medical equipment and arcane focus. The blood moon rises in 1 hour, a time when moonborn power peaks beyond all natural limits. We'll extract every drop of the child's abilities and use them to crack reality itself wide open. Fiona's glow intensified, and frost began spreading across the chamber floor. Several of the captured children whimpered and pressed themselves to the backs of their cells as the temperature plummeted. Fascinating, Simon murmured, taking readings on his tablet. Even in distress, she's generating more raw power than we've seen from adult moonborn in their death throes. Daddy, Fiona's voice cut through their clinical observations like a bell. I can feel it coming. The big magic. It wants to get out. The walls of the chamber began to vibrate with harmonic frequencies that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ancient symbols carved into the stone started glowing with silver light that pulsed in rhythm with Fiona's heartbeat. The facility wasn't built here by chance, Jonathan explained, his voice tight with excitement. This mountain sits on a convergence of ley lines, natural channels of mystical energy that crisscross the earth. With the right catalyst, we can tap into power that predates human civilization. Elena's chains rattled as she struggled against them, her golden eyes burning with desperate urgency. Kai, she gasped, there's something else. Something I never told you about Fiona. Elena, save your strength. No. Her mental voice hit him with surprising force. Listen to me. Fiona isn't alone. She has a brother, a twin. I hid him away when she was born, gave him to someone I trusted. If they get Fiona's power and find her brother. The implication hit Kai like a physical blow. 2 bridge walkers, their abilities amplified by their twin bond, in the hands of people who saw supernatural children as weapons to be harvested. Where is he? But before Elena could answer, alarms began shrieking throughout the facility. Thomas and the other wolves had found the main entrance and were making their presence known with explosive enthusiasm. Time to accelerate our schedule, Jonathan announced calmly. Simon, begin the extraction process. We can refine our technique after we have the child's power safely contained. No. Kai lunged forward, but a wall of rogue wolves blocked his path. Fiona's scream of terror and rage tore through the chamber, not just sound, but psychic force that shattered every piece of glass in the facility and sent several rogues to their knees with blood streaming from their ears. The mountain itself seemed to respond to her distress. Cracks appeared in the stone walls as something vast and ancient stirred in the depths below. "She's destabilizing the convergence," someone shouted over the growing chaos. "Then we take what we can get," Jonathan snapped. "Initiate emergency extraction, now." Elena's eyes met Kai's across the chamber, and in that gaze he saw a love that had survived 5 years of separation, torture, and the slow dissolution of her life force. But more than love, he saw determination. "I'm sorry, my darling. For all of it. But I won't let them have her." "Elena, no." She smiled, beautiful and heartbreaking and fierce, then began to sing. It wasn't the lullabies she'd hummed when they were young and in love, or even the moonborn healing songs Fiona had mentioned. This was something primal and terrible, a melody that seemed to pull power directly from her dying cells and fling it outward like a weapon. The silver chains binding her began to crack and smoke. The arcane symbols carved into her altar blazed with light so bright it was painful to look at directly. "She's using her life force as a focusing lens," Simon shouted, his voice nearly lost in the growing magical storm. "She's going to." The chains shattered like glass. Elena rose from the altar with power blazing around her like silver fire, her body burning with the last of her moonborn heritage. But instead of attacking their captors, she turned toward Fiona's cage. "Run, little moonbeam," she whispered, her voice somehow audible despite the chaos. "Daddy's here now. You don't have to be brave anymore." She pressed her hands against the reinforced bars of Fiona's cage, and they dissolved like morning mist. Fiona threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing, "Mommy, you're hurt. You're all glowy and wrong." "I know, sweetheart." Elena's form was becoming translucent as she poured the remainder of her life into breaking the magical barriers holding the other children. "But I need you to listen very carefully. Your brother." The blood moon chose that moment to crest the mountain peaks above them. Fiona's power, amplified by her mother's sacrifice and the Fionar energy streaming down through cracks in the ceiling, exploded outward in a wave of silver-white force that tore reality apart at the seams. The chamber didn't just collapse, it fractured, dimensions folding in on themselves as the barriers between worlds cracked like eggshells. Through the rifts, Kai caught glimpses of impossible landscapes, forests made of starlight, cities that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, creatures of pure magic that had never known physical form. Fiona stood at the center of the chaos, her 4-year-old body blazing with power that could remake universes, tears streaming down her face as she watched her mother fade into light and love and memory. "Mommy!" Her scream tore through dimensional barriers, sending shockwaves across multiple planes of existence. And somewhere in the distance, another child's voice answered, young, frightened, unmistakably connected to Fiona by bonds deeper than blood. Her twin brother, calling to his sister across impossible distances as reality itself began to unravel around them all. Chapter 4. The world was breaking apart. Kai stood in the fractured remains of his father's facility, holding Fiona against his chest while reality warped and twisted around them. Through the dimensional rifts Elena's sacrifice had torn open, he could see impossible things. Forests of crystalline trees that sang with harmonies older than time, oceans that flowed upward into infinite sky, creatures of pure light dancing through cosmic storms. But all of it paled beside the devastating absence where Elena's presence had been just moments before. "Mommy's gone," Fiona whispered against his neck, her small body shaking with exhaustion from the power that had nearly destroyed several dimensions. "I can't feel her anymore." Kai's throat closed with grief he couldn't afford to feel. Not yet. Not when Jonathan and Simon were already regrouping their forces, not when other supernatural children were still trapped and terrified, not when. Another child's scream echoed through the chaos, and Fiona's head snapped up with desperate hope. "That's him," she breathed. "That's my brother." The voice came again, young and frightened, but this time Kai could hear the words, "Fiona. Where are you? They said you were coming, but I can't find you." "Oliver." Fiona called back, her voice carrying supernatural harmonics that cut through dimensional static. I'm here. Daddy found me. Through the largest rift, Kai caught sight of movement, a small figure stumbling through what looked like a mirror version of the facility, everything familiar but wrong. The boy appeared to be Fiona's age, with the same golden eyes and coffee-colored curls, but where Fiona radiated warmth despite her power, this child felt cold, empty. Dangerous. Oliver Morrison, Jonathan's voice cut through the chaos with grim satisfaction. Come to Papa, boy. It's time to show your sister what 5 years of proper training can accomplish. The child who emerged from the dimensional rift made Kai's blood run cold. Oliver looked exactly like Fiona, down to the adorable dimples when he smiled. But his golden eyes held no warmth, no childhood innocence, only calculating intelligence that belonged in an adult's face. He was dressed in tactical gear that had been sized down for a 4-year-old, and he moved with predatory grace that spoke of extensive combat training. Hello, Fiona, Oliver said politely, as if they were meeting at a playground instead of in the middle of an interdimensional catastrophe. Father says you've been very naughty. He says you need to learn proper discipline. Fiona pressed herself closer to Kai, her power flickering nervously around them. You smell wrong, she whispered. You smell like shadows and sadness. Oliver tilted his head with bird-like curiosity. I smell like efficiency. Father taught me that emotions are weaknesses that compromise operational effectiveness. 4 years old, and he sounded like a military report. What did you do to him? Kai snarled at his father, who was watching the twin reunion with obvious pride. I raised him correctly, Jonathan replied. No fairy tales about gentle wolf kings or bedtime stories about love conquering all. Oliver understands that power is meant to be used, not wasted on sentiment. Simon stepped up beside Jonathan, his tablet displaying energy readings that were off the charts. The dimensional rifts are destabilizing. We need to extract both children now before the convergence collapses entirely. Agreed. Jonathan nodded to Oliver. Demonstrate your training, son. Show your sister how Bridgewalker power should be properly utilized. Oliver raised his small hands, and the temperature in the chamber dropped 20 degrees. Where Fiona's power felt like moonlight and starshine, his was ice and endless void. The fractured walls around them began to resonate with harmonic frequencies that hurt to hear. Don't. Fiona cried out, her own power flaring in response. You'll hurt people. Casualties are acceptable if they serve the greater objective, Oliver recited, his childish voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. The twins' powers collided in the space between them, creating a vortex of competing energies that made the dimensional rifts pulse wider. Through the growing tears in reality, Kai could see more of Jonathan's forces, not just rogues, but creatures from other realms, beings of shadow and hunger that had been waiting centuries for a chance to enter this world. An invasion army, held back only by barriers that Fiona and Oliver's combined power could shatter completely. You see the beauty of it, Jonathan continued, raising his voice over the growing chaos. One child alone would take years to break through the dimensional barriers. But twins, working in perfect opposition, creation and destruction, order and chaos, they can tear reality apart in minutes. I won't let you use them, Kai growled, his wolf rising to full alpha dominance. You won't have a choice. Simon gestured to the rogues surrounding them. Surrender both children, and we'll make Elena's sacrifice meaningful. Resist, and watch as we use their power to bring through enough supernatural forces to subjugate both the human and supernatural worlds. Fiona tugged on Kai's shirt, her golden eyes wide with understanding that no 4-year-old should possess. Daddy, she whispered, I can feel what he wants to do. The shadow grandfather wants to break all the walls between the magic places and here. But if the walls break, the worlds will bleed together, Kai finished, his heart sinking as he grasped the full scope of his father's plan. Creatures that were never meant to exist in our reality will pour through. Humanity won't stand a chance. Neither will most supernatural beings, Fiona added solemnly. The hungry things in the dark places will eat everyone. Oliver's head snapped toward his sister with the first genuine emotion Kai had seen from him, confusion. Father says the other realms contain allies who will help us rule. They're not lies, Fiona said sadly. They're monsters who whisper lies. I can hear them through the cracks, Oliver. They're already trying to crawl through. For just a moment, Oliver's perfect composure wavered. Through the bond all twins shared, he was feeling Fiona's genuine terror and love, emotions his training had tried to eliminate but couldn't entirely suppress. You're afraid, he said wonderingly. Of course I'm afraid. Fiona's power pulsed with protective instinct. The shadow things want to hurt everyone we love. Don't you want to protect people, Oliver? Oliver looked lost, a 4-year-old boy struggling with conditioning that had been forced on him since birth. Father says protection is an illusion. That only the strong deserve to survive. Enough. Jonathan's voice cracked like a whip. Oliver, complete your mission. Extract your sister's power and open the gateways. Now. Oliver's training reasserted itself, his golden eyes going cold again as he raised his hands toward Fiona. But before he could strike, the facility shook with an explosion that sent everyone staggering. Thomas and the rest of Kai's pack had found them. Alpha. Thomas's voice echoed through the corridors as Kai's wolves poured into the chamber. We've secured the perimeter and freed the children, but there are things coming through those rifts that... His words were cut off as something that had never been meant for this reality squeezed through one of the larger dimensional tiers. It was shadow given form, hunger made manifest, with too many teeth and eyes that burned with malevolent intelligence. It looked at the assembled humans and supernatural beings like a starving man might look at a feast. Feed, it whispered in a voice like breaking glass. Feed on flesh, feed on power, feed on fear. Fiona screamed and buried her face against Kai's chest. Even Oliver took an involuntary step backward, his training momentarily forgotten in the face of primordial terror. You see? Jonathan shouted over the growing chaos as more shadow creatures began pushing through the rifts. This is what your sentimentality has wrought. If we don't control the breach, these things will devour everything. And your solution is to make it worse? Kai snarled back. My solution is to direct the chaos. Better to rule over a transformed world than to watch it be consumed. The shadow creature lunged toward the nearest group of rescued children, but Fiona's power flared outward in a protective barrier that sent it shrieking back into the void. The effort left her pale and trembling. I can't keep them out for long, she whispered. There are too many, and they're getting stronger. Oliver was staring at his sister with something approaching awe. You protected them. Even though it hurt you. That's what family does, Fiona said simply. That's what love does. Simon raised his weapon, some kind of modified tranquilizer designed for supernatural targets. This ends now. We take both children and complete the ritual, even if we have to do it while fighting off interdimensional parasites. Wait. Oliver's young voice cut through the tension like a bell. There's another way. Everyone froze, staring at the child who'd been raised as a weapon but was looking at his twin sister with dawning understanding. The power doesn't have to be all destruction or all creation, Oliver continued, his words coming faster as the idea took shape. In training, they taught me about balance. Equal and opposite forces creating stability. Fiona's eyes widened with excitement. Like Mommy's stories. The Sun Prince and Moon Princess had to work together to keep the world safe. If we split the Bridgewalker power between us, Oliver said, his tactical mind racing through possibilities, instead of using it to tear down barriers, we could use it to strengthen them. Make the walls between worlds so strong that nothing could break through. Absolutely not, Jonathan snapped. That would trap us here permanently, cut off from the resources of other realms. It would save both worlds, Kai interrupted, understanding flooding through him. Make the barriers impermeable from either side. But it would mean giving up the chance to unite the supernatural realms, Simon protested. Think of what we could accomplish with unlimited access to magical resources. I'm thinking of what those resources would cost, Kai replied, watching as more shadow creatures pressed against Fiona's failing barrier. Some things are too dangerous to control. Oliver looked between his father and his sister, and for the first time since emerging from the rift, He looked like what he was, a frightened 4-year-old boy who'd been carrying impossible burdens. "Fiona," he said quietly, "if we do this, if we split the power, will we still be special?" Fiona smiled at him with all the warmth that had been missing from his life. "We'll be special because we're family. Because we choose to protect people instead of hurting them. That's the most special thing of all." Oliver nodded slowly, then looked at Jonathan with defiance that was purely his own, not programmed by years of conditioning. "I refuse the mission, Father. My sister is right. Some things matter more than power." "You ungrateful little..." Jonathan lunged toward Oliver, but Kai was faster. The alpha power he'd been suppressing for years exploded outward as he shifted into his war form, not quite wolf, not quite human, but something perfectly designed for violence. His claws caught Jonathan across the chest, sending the older man flying backward into a wall. "You want to see what 5 years of careful control looks like when it snaps?" Kai snarled, his voice carrying harmonics that made even Simon's rogue step back. "Touch my children again and find out." But while the adults fought, Fiona and Oliver had joined hands in the center of the chaos. Their combined power rose like a symphony, Fiona's warm starlight harmonizing with Oliver's crystalline void, creation and preservation balancing destruction and renewal. The dimensional rifts stopped expanding, held in perfect stasis by twin forces that neither pushed nor pulled but simply existed in eternal equilibrium. "It's working," Fiona breathed, her face glowing with concentration and joy. "I can feel the walls getting stronger." "The shadow things are going back," Oliver added, wonder creeping into his voice as he experienced his first taste of using power to protect rather than destroy. "They can't push through anymore." The shadow creatures shrieked their frustration as they were pulled back into their native void, the strengthened barriers between worlds becoming impermeable to their hunger. "No." Simon raised his weapon toward the twins, but Thomas was already moving. Kai's lieutenant tackled the traitor, sending them both crashing into a bank of monitoring equipment. Jonathan struggled to his feet, blood streaming from the wounds Kai had inflicted. "You fools. You're cutting us off from infinite power sources." "We're cutting everyone off from infinite danger," Kai corrected. "That's what real alphas do, protect their pack, not exploit them." The dimensional rifts began closing one by one, reality healing itself as the twins' combined power sealed the barriers between worlds. Within minutes, the facility looked almost normal again, if you ignored the destroyed equipment, unconscious rogues, and freed supernatural children who were hugging each other with desperate relief. Fiona and Oliver swayed on their feet, the effort of rebalancing dimensional forces having drained most of their strength. But they were still holding hands, still standing together. "Did we do good?" Fiona asked, looking up at Kai with golden eyes that shone with exhaustion and hope. "You did perfect, baby girl." Kai knelt down and carefully gathered both twins into his arms. "You both did perfect." Oliver stiffened at the unfamiliar contact, but after a moment he relaxed into his first real hug. "Does this mean, do I get to have a family now?" "A real one?" "You've always had a family," Kai said firmly. "I just didn't know where to find you. But I'll never lose you again. Either of you." "Daddy?" Fiona's small voice was barely audible against his shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart. Can we visit Mommy's star every night? I want to tell her about Oliver. I want her to know we're safe now." Kai's throat closed with emotion, but he managed to whisper, "Every single night, I promise." Simon, bleeding from his fight with Thomas but still conscious, managed one last sneer. "This isn't over, Kai. There are others who share our vision. Others who understand that power is meant to be used, not wasted on." He never finished the sentence. A tranquilizer dart, one of his own weapons, caught him in the neck, and he collapsed as Sarah stepped out from behind an overturned table. "Sorry," she said without a trace of remorse. He was getting annoying. Jonathan was still alive but badly injured, his dreams of supernatural empire crumbling around him. As Kai's wolves secured the facility and tended to the rescued children, the former alpha looked at his son with something that might have been respect. "You could have ruled everything," he said quietly. I already rule everything that matters, Kai replied, his arms tightening protectively around his children. And that's enough. 6 months later. The Morrison estate had been transformed. Where once it had been a monument to corporate success, all steel and glass and intimidating minimalism, now it overflowed with the chaos and joy of children who were finally free to be children. Fiona and Oliver raced through the gardens, their laughter echoing off the mountains as they played an elaborate game of tag that occasionally involved minor reality manipulation. They'd learned to control their powers, but more importantly, they'd learned to be siblings, fighting over toys, defending each other from imaginary monsters, and falling asleep curled together like puppies. Kai watched them from his office window, a smile tugging at his lips as Fiona paused to show Oliver how to make frost flowers bloom on the fountain's edge. His daughter had kept her promise to help her brother learn about love and family, while Oliver had surprised everyone with his gift for strategy and his fierce protectiveness of the other rescued children. The latest reports, Alpha. Thomas entered the office with a stack of folders, but his attention was on the playing children too. The Phoenix Foundation for Supernatural Youth has placed 47 children in safe homes this month. The Vancouver PAC wants to know if we can help them establish their own sanctuary program. Kai nodded absently. Morrison Industries had been quietly transformed into something unprecedented, a corporation dedicated to protecting supernatural children and supporting the families who took them in. It turned out that righteous anger was just as effective a motivator as greed, and infinitely more satisfying. Sir? Thomas hesitated. There's one more thing. This came through the secure channels this morning. He handed Kai an envelope made of paper that seemed to shimmer with its own light. The handwriting was elegant, flowing, definitely not modern. Alpha Morrison, guardian of the bridge walkers. Kai opened it carefully, aware that anything arriving through their supernatural communication networks could be dangerous. To the Alpha who chose love over power. The Council of Ancients has watched your children's sacrifice with great interest. The barriers between worlds now stand stronger than they have in a millennium, and for this, all realms owe a debt that cannot easily be repaid. However, you should know that the Moonborn line's destiny has only just begun. Fiona and Oliver's actions have awakened something that has slept for centuries. Others of their bloodline, scattered across the world and hidden even from themselves, are beginning to remember what they truly are. Your daughter is not just a bridge walker, she is the first of a new generation that will determine whether the supernatural world remains fractured and hidden, or finally finds unity and purpose. The choice, as always, will be theirs to make when they come of age. Guard them well, Alpha. The Council will be watching. The Council of Ancients. P.S. Ask Fiona about her dreams of the Crystal Library. She has been visiting us while she sleeps, though she likely believes it is merely her imagination. Some gifts transcend the barriers between worlds. Kai stared at the letter for a long moment, then looked back out at his children. Fiona was now teaching Oliver and 3 other young survivors how to make snow angels in July, their combined powers creating a winter wonderland in the middle of his rose garden. More destiny. More ancient forces and cosmic responsibilities. But as he watched Fiona throw a snowball at Oliver's head and dissolve into giggles when he retaliated with a perfectly formed ice sculpture of a bunny, Kai realized something important. Whatever came next, they would face it as a family. Daddy. Fiona's voice carried clearly through the window. Come play with us. Oliver made a snow fort and we need help defending it from the evil ice bears. Kai smiled, tucked the letter into his desk drawer, and headed outside to join the most important battle of his life, the eternal war between children and imaginary monsters, where love always won and every day ended with stories about brave mommies who loved them to the moon and back. Some destinies, he reflected as Fiona launched herself into his arms, were worth embracing. #Epilogue, to the moon and back. 2 years later ***. The first snow of winter was falling outside the kitchen windows of the Morrison estate as Kai stood at the stove, carefully flipping pancakes while trying not to burn himself on the spatula. Cooking had never been a skill required of a ruthless Alpha CEO, but fatherhood had a way of expanding one's repertoire in unexpected directions. Daddy, you're making the sad face again, Luna observed from her perch at the kitchen island, her legs swinging as she watched him with those perceptive golden eyes that missed nothing. "I'm concentrating," Kai protested, though he relaxed his expression. "Pancakes are serious business." "Oliver says you look constipated when you concentrate," she announced with 6-year-old honesty that made him nearly drop the spatula. "Oliver said what now?" "He's not wrong," came his son's voice from the doorway. Oliver padded into the kitchen wearing dinosaur pajamas and bedhead that defied gravity, looking like any normal 6-year-old except for the way frost gathered automatically on whatever he touched. "Your concentration face is very intense." 2 years of love and family had worked miracles on Oliver. The cold, tactical child who'd emerged from the dimensional rift had gradually thawed into a boy who laughed at cartoons, cried over injured birds, and had strong opinions about the proper chocolate chip to pancake ratio. He still carried scars from his early conditioning, nightmares sometimes, moments of emotional shutdown when things became overwhelming, but Luna had appointed herself his personal healing specialist. Besides, Oliver continued, climbing onto the stool next to his sister, "Sarah taught me that word last week when she was fixing the dishwasher." "I'm having words with Sarah," Kai muttered, sliding perfectly golden pancakes onto plates. The Morrison estate had become home to not just his immediate family, but to several pack members who'd taken on the role of aunts and uncles to the children they'd helped rescue. "Don't you dare," Luna said sternly. "Aunt Sarah teaches us the best words. And she lets us help when she fixes things." "Which is how you learned to rewire the guest bathroom lights," Kai pointed out. "That was educational," Oliver protested. "And we only caused one small electrical fire." "Very small," Luna agreed. "Barely any smoke at all." Kai set their plates in front of them and couldn't help smiling as they immediately began their morning ritual, Luna carefully arranging her pancakes by size while Oliver created elaborate geometric patterns with his syrup. Some things about having supernatural children were challenging, but watching them develop their own little quirks and preferences was endlessly delightful. "So," he said, settling beside them with his own breakfast, "what's the plan for today?" "It's Saturday, so no tutoring sessions." Both children attended a private school designed for supernatural youth. One of 3 such institutions that Morrison Industries had helped establish across the country. But weekends were family time, jealously guarded and filled with whatever adventures the twins could devise. "Museum," Luna announced immediately. "The Natural History Museum has a new exhibit about wolves, and I want to see if they got anything right." "They never do," Oliver said sagely. "Remember the documentary we watched that said wolves were savage predators who hunt in bloodthirsty packs?" "Daddy growled at the TV for 20 minutes, Luna giggled. "It was very educational." "I did not growl for 20 minutes, Kai protested. "You did too. And then you called the Discovery Channel to complain." "Someone has to maintain journalistic standards." Oliver grinned, still a relatively new expression that lit up his entire face. "Can we go to the planetarium too?" Luna's been having those dreams again about the Crystal Library, and she thinks it might be connected to the constellation displays. Kai's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Luna's dreams had been getting more vivid lately, filled with images of vast libraries that existed between dimensions where knowledge from across the cosmos was stored. The Council of Ancients had mentioned that she'd been visiting them while she slept, but Luna herself remained convinced it was all just very imaginative dreams. "What kind of dreams, sweetheart?" Luna scrunched her face thoughtfully. "The librarian lady with the silver hair showed me books about the old times, when the moonborn families lived in cities made of crystal and starlight. She said I'm supposed to learn about our history so I can help write the future chapters." "But it's just dreams," Oliver added quickly, recognizing his father's concerned expression. "She always wakes up perfectly fine." "With new knowledge she shouldn't have," Kai said gently. "Luna, yesterday you were speaking ancient Gaelic during breakfast. Where did you learn that?" "The books in the Crystal Library have translation magic," she said matter-of-factly. "But I promise I'm not doing anything dangerous, Daddy. The librarian lady is very nice, and she makes sure I drink plenty of dream tea so I don't get tired." Kai made a mental note to research protective wards for lucid dreaming. Having children with developing supernatural abilities meant that every phase of their growth presented new challenges. Museum and planetarium it is, he decided. But first, we need to visit Mommy's star. This had become their Saturday morning tradition, going up to the estate's observatory to look through the telescope at the constellation Elena had loved best. Luna insisted that her mother lived there now, keeping watch over their family from among the stars. They climbed the spiral staircase to the tower room Kai had converted into their private observatory, complete with a professional-grade telescope and comfortable seating for stargazing. The morning sky was too bright for serious astronomy, but Luna never seemed to mind. "There she is," Luna whispered, pressing her eye to the telescope's eyepiece even though the star was invisible in daylight. "Hi, Mommy. Oliver lost another tooth yesterday, and Daddy only cried a little bit when he found it under the pillow." "I didn't cry," Kai protested. "You got all misty-eyed," Oliver corrected. "And you kept the tooth in your desk drawer instead of throwing it away like the tooth fairy instructions said." The tooth fairy instructions were very specific about proper disposal procedures, Kai said defensively. "I wanted to make sure I followed protocol." Luna giggled and stepped away from the telescope so Oliver could have his turn. "Mommy, Daddy's taking us to see the wolf exhibit today. I'm going to tell him all the things they got wrong and maybe howl at the dioramas." "Please don't howl at the dioramas," Kai said. "We're still recovering from the incident at the zoo." "That was a perfectly reasonable response to their alpha dominance placard," Oliver said, adjusting the telescope's focus with the precision that characterized everything he did. "Hi, Mom. Luna's been teaching me how to make snow sculptures that don't melt, and I'm getting really good at it. Maybe when you come visit in my dreams tonight, I can show you the castle I built." Kai's breath caught. Oliver rarely mentioned Elena visiting his dreams, unlike Luna, who chattered constantly about her mother's nightly appearances. But lately, he'd been making small comments that suggested Elena was finding ways to reach both her children across the veil between worlds. "She comes to see you too?" Luna asked, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Oliver nodded, suddenly shy. "Not as much as she visits you. But sometimes, when I have nightmares about the old place, she comes and sings the lullabies you taught her. They make the bad dreams go away." Luna launched herself at her brother in an enthusiastic hug that would have knocked a normal child off his feet. Oliver caught her easily, their supernatural reflexes and twin bond making them perfectly synchronized. "She loves you just as much as she loves me," Luna said fiercely. "She told me so. She said you're the bravest little boy she's ever known, and she's so proud of how you learned to love people instead of just protecting them." Oliver's eyes filled with tears, another emotion that had been slowly emerging as he healed from his early conditioning. "Really? Really, really? And she said that even though she can't hug us with her arms anymore, every time we hug each other, she can feel it too." They stayed wrapped around each other for a long moment, and Kai had to turn away to compose himself. Watching his children heal each other with such unconscious grace never failed to humble him. "Daddy," Luna's voice was muffled against Oliver's shoulder, "are you sad that Mommy can't come back for real?" The question he'd been dreading. Kai turned back to find both children watching him with identical golden eyes full of compassion that broke his heart. "Every day," he admitted. "But I'm not sad that she's watching over us. And I'm grateful every single day that I got to meet you too, even if it happened in the scariest way possible." "Do you think you'll ever love someone else the way you loved Mommy?" Oliver asked with the directness that sometimes caught adults off guard. Kai considered the question seriously. Over the past 2 years, well-meaning friends and pack members had occasionally suggested he might want to date again. The idea felt foreign, not because he was still mourning Elena, though he was, but because his heart was so completely full of his children that there didn't seem to be room for anything else. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Right now, I love being your daddy so much that I can't imagine needing anything else. But maybe someday, if the right person came along, we might have room in our family for someone new." "Would they have to pass tests?" Luna asked seriously. "Absolutely. Very rigorous tests." "Like what?" Oliver was clearly intrigued by the logistics. "Well," Kai pretended to think deeply, "they'd have to be able to make acceptable pancakes." They'd have to understand that howling at inaccurate wolf documentaries is completely reasonable. They'd have to appreciate the artistic value of snow sculptures that violate several laws of physics. And they'd have to love Mommy too, Luna added firmly. Not in a romantic way, but they'd have to understand that she's still part of our family and always will be. That's the most important test of all, Kai agreed, pulling both children into his arms. But for now, it's just us three, and that's perfect. They spent another few minutes in the observatory, taking turns looking through the telescope and sharing their plans for the day. As they prepared to head back downstairs, Luna paused at the top of the spiral staircase. Daddy? Do you think other kids like us feel as safe as we do? The question was vintage Luna. Her supernatural empathy meant she was constantly aware of the emotional states of others, and she worried about children she'd never met with the intensity of someone much older. I hope so, sweetheart. That's why we work so hard with the foundation, to make sure every supernatural child has a family that loves them. Good, she said with satisfaction. Because in my dreams, the librarian lady shows me pictures of kids all over the world who are just discovering their powers. Some of them look scared. What do you tell them when you see them in the library? That they're not alone. That somewhere there's a family waiting to love them exactly the way they are. And that being different isn't scary once you find your people. Oliver nodded solemnly. Maybe when we're older, we can help find them. Like a supernatural rescue mission. That's a beautiful idea, Kai said, making another mental note to discuss expanding the Foundation's international outreach programs. His children's natural inclination toward helping others never ceased to amaze him. They made their way back to the kitchen, where Sarah was waiting with her tool kit and a suspicious expression. All right, which one of you rewired the guest bathroom again? She demanded. The lights are now controlled by the garbage disposal switch, and I'm pretty sure that violates several building codes. Luna and Oliver exchanged guilty looks. It was an experiment, Oliver said defensively. We were testing electrical conductivity theories, Luna added. Sarah looked skeptical. And whose idea was it to connect the system to the kitchen? That was collaborative innovation, they said in unison, clearly having rehearsed this response. Kai buried his face in his hands. I'm doubling your allowances, aren't I? Probably, Sarah said cheerfully. But look at it this way, by the time they're teenagers, they'll be able to rewire the entire house. Think of the money you'll save on electricians. Assuming the house is still standing, Kai muttered. Where's your sense of adventure? Luna asked, patting his arm consolingly. Besides, we're very careful with our experiments. We always make sure there's a fire extinguisher nearby. That's supposed to be reassuring? Oliver calculated the optimal placement for maximum coverage, she continued proudly. We're very scientific about our electrical work. Kai looked at his 6-year-olds, his brilliant, powerful, occasionally destructive 6-year-olds who could manipulate reality but still needed help reaching the top shelf in the pantry, and felt his heart swell with so much love it was almost painful. Museum, he announced. Before you decide to renovate anything else. Can we get hot chocolate afterward? Luna asked hopefully. And visit the bookstore? Oliver added. I want to see if they have any new books about engineering. And maybe stop by the park so we can feed the ducks? Luna continued. I made them a song that might help with their migration patterns. Please tell me you're not planning to use supernatural powers to interfere with natural wildlife behavior, Kai said weakly. Of course not, Luna said with wide, innocent eyes. It's just a regular song. With maybe tiny little bits of harmonic magic to help them remember the way south. Very tiny bits, Oliver confirmed. Barely noticeable. Kai looked at Sarah, who was trying not to laugh. This is my life now. Could be worse, she pointed out. Remember when Luna decided to help Mrs. Patterson's garden grow faster and accidentally created sentient rose bushes? They were very polite sentient rose bushes, Luna protested. And they only asked for water and compliments on their blooms. The Homeowners Association is still trying to figure out how to write regulations for talking plants, Kai said. But yes, museum, hot chocolate, bookstore, and carefully supervised duck feeding. Does that sound like a good Saturday? Both children cheered and raced off to get dressed, their laughter echoing through the halls of the estate that had been transformed from a sterile monument to success into a home filled with love, chaos, and the occasional electrical fire. As Kai watched them go, he pulled out his phone and scrolled to Elena's contact information. He'd never been able to delete it, and sometimes, when the house was quiet and the children were asleep, he would type messages he'd never send. "They're growing up so fast," he typed. Luna lost her first tooth last week, and Oliver is reading at a high school level. They ask about you every day, and I try to answer honestly without making them sad. I think you'd be proud of who they're becoming. I know I am, I love you. We all love you. To the moon and back, just like you taught Luna to say, He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it character by character, the way he always did. But somehow, he felt lighter afterward, as if the words had found their way to Elena regardless. Daddy. Luna's voice carried down from upstairs. Oliver can't find his lucky socks. They're in the dryer, he called back. The dryer's not working. Because someone rewired the electrical system. That's not our fault. It's literally entirely your fault. Kai smiled and headed upstairs to help his children prepare for their day. There would be more adventures, more experiments that violated building codes, more questions about love and loss and the strange gift of being different in a world that was slowly learning to accept difference. But there would also be laughter in every room, bedtime stories that featured brave mommies and protective daddies, and the daily miracle of watching two extraordinary children discover that their greatest power wasn't in the magic they could wield, but in the love they chose to share. And every night, when the moon rose over the mountains and the children were safely asleep, Kai would stand in the observatory and whisper to the stars, "Thank you for giving them to me. Thank you for teaching me that the strongest alphas are the ones who choose love over fear, Thank you for showing me that the best stories always end with families who love each other to the moon and back, Outside, the first snow continued to fall, covering the estate in pristine white that would soon be decorated with snow angels, fort walls, and the intricate ice sculptures of two children who were learning, day by day, that magic was most beautiful when it was shared with the people you loved most. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.